I'm Darwin from Athletes for Faith. Check us out, athletesforfaith.org. Our goal is just to provide a platform for Christian professional athletes to share their story so you guys can find out a little bit more about what it's like to be out there on the field representing God. And I'm joined by a good friend of mine, Ladell Betts, your former Washington Redskins running back, also played for the New Orleans Saints. Ladell, thanks for joining me, man. How's it going?
Not a problem. I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Pretty good, man. You know, Ladell, you're a good friend of mine. You're an interesting guy, and I don't think I want the people to really know not so much what you did on the field, but a little bit more about Ladell Betts. So, I know you're a Christian, man. Me growing up, Ladell, I had a lot of camps that I attended to as a youth, and that's really what got me involved in terms of even my Christianity. I was part of a Christian fellowship of Christian athletes. Were you involved with anything like that growing up? What was your take on growing up and being a Christian in your home?
Well, for me, I had the privilege of growing up in a pretty much Christian household. So, my mom is definitely a believer. My grandparents have always been believers and have always attended church. So, from my earliest days that I can, even think back or remember anything, I've been in church. Matter of fact, I even started off at a elementary Baptist school, where we learned the books of the Bible and things like that, little subtle things as a kindergartner. So my whole childhood and upbringing has been in church, every Sunday. And Mom used to take me to prayer study and Bible worship on Wednesday nights. So my whole childhood has been in the church.
So you growing up and being a football player, getting drafted, and you played at Iowa, running back at Iowa. Now, what was that all about? I mean, what was that like, being a high school, being around your family? Did you find yourself relying on God more so around those times? Because I imagine that was probably one of the biggest moves, your first biggest move that you made in your career, in your life altogether.
Yeah, you know what? Christ has always been a crucial part of my life. I mean, my faith in God has always been one of those things I've never taken for granted, and I think it's carried me through a lot of tough times and even good times. So even when, like I said, times got rough or, a little adversity, I just basically relied on my faith and never tried to take the lows too low and the highs too high. I always try to keep myself somewhere in the middle because, that's just how I was raised and how I believe as a Christian, just to take each day one step at a time and know that in the end, God has has our best intentions in mind.
So you transitioned from Iowa, you got drafted by the Washington Redskins, played for that organization for 8 years, and then moved on to the New Orleans Saints for a year. Quarterback Drew Brees. You guys almost took it to the championship again. So you've been around just great talent on both teams, and I imagine you've faced a lot of things. What is it like to be a Christian guy in the NFL, in those locker rooms, not only on Sundays, Ladell, but what about every other day? What does that look like? I have so many questions for you. Or there's other teammates that you were able to fellowship with, or did you find yourself being one of the very few?
No, never one of the very few. Actually, believe it or not, there are a lot of guys that like to get together and fellowship and worship. Whether it's through Bible studies or what we used to have with the Redskins. And as everyone knows, I spent most of my career there. I spent 8 years with the Redskins. So we had what was called chapel. We had chapel service the night before the game, so that was like our version of church. And we always had a team chaplain. So that was, for me, that was my church. So I very rarely ever missed a chapel service the night before a game. And I had the privilege of playing for a coach named Coach Gibbs, who was a firm believer in his faith. And then after Coach Gibbs was Coach Zorn. So coaches like that were very supportive of Christian athletes and very supportive of having a team chaplain around. I mean, just to get guys together in a different setting other than just meetings and football, and a chance to talk about other things that you go through in life. So I was very fortunate with the Redskins to have a pretty good support in terms of Christianity and in terms of chapel service.
That name that you mentioned, Coach Joe Gibbs. You played with great coaches, but that is a Hall of Fame coach, a legend, and on and off the field. Now, tell me, can you recall a specific story or something that you took away from that guy, from Coach Gibbs, playing under him for a few years, that just impacted your life? Because being on the outside, it just seems like he was that guy. And those were different years, it seemed like. So do you recall anything like that you took away from him?
I don't recall it like any specific story, so to speak. But one thing I can say is that I learned from Coach Gibbs is Coach Gibbs believed in people. And when I say that, I mean like he believed in the way you build a team and the way you win is by having the right group of guys. And that means, character. And of course, you're always going to have a few guys that don't quite fit the mold, a few guys that have, the boisterous personalities. But all in all, Coach Gibbs believed in having the right group of guys. He believed in character, hard work, and being smart and tough. He wasn't about trick plays and, all these X's and O's. Coach Gibbs just believed in playing hard, smart, tough football, and he believed if you had the right group of guys and the right group of guys fighting for the same common goal, you could win. And that was one thing I learned from him. It wasn't about the fancy plays. It was just about having the right group of guys together and everybody working together.
And you saw it on the field. You guys went through a few streaks and making it to the playoffs there. But Ladell, now another question is, I have stories. I love Bible stories, sharing it with the kids. I grew up at VBS, Vacation Bible School, all that good stuff. And one of my favorite stories is Jonah and the whale. Do you have? I love those stories, Ladell. What is your favorite Bible story, man, that you share with your kids or that you remember growing up that your mom shared with you?
I think one that always relates to, that you can always think about in terms of football is, David and Goliath. It's not always the biggest, baddest, guy, the guy that looks like Tarzan on the field. Sometimes you can find some of the toughest people and most important people in the smallest packages. And I think the story of David and Goliath is a life lesson for not only kids but for adults as well. So I think that's one story that always sticks out to me.
Do you have a particular verse that you carried with you on the field game day?
I used to always write Philippians 4:13 on my wristbands when I was in college, and I think that's kind of one thing that's always stuck with me. It's pretty simple. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. That's pretty simple. I think a lot of people know, and I think it kind of hits home for me.
Man, that sounds great. Well, Ladell, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story, your testimony with Athletes for Faith. Everyone, check us out. We are trying to spread the gospel here. athletesforfaith.org. Joined by Ladell Betts.